Bigger than Capes.
Give me some outside.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, dry.
Hello and welcome to Bigger Than Capes. I am Angela and today I am talking to David Pepose and we are talking about his new Kickstarter for issue 2 of the OZ. Hello, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be on the show. I want to ask, though, on your side of the pond, would you guys call it the OZ, or is that just Australia?
We would be the OZ, yeah.
Okay.
To the point where I've been training my brain to say the OZ all week.
Okay.
Because the natural way is the OZ. So if I go with the OZ, that's why.
Well, we can definitely. Anytime I go overseas now, I'll just refer to it as the OZ and see if anybody says anything. But no, thank you so much for having me on the show. Excited to catch up with you again. And yeah, this book, it's been a long time coming, and it'll be about a year to the day after we launched our last Kickstarter. And it's if you like The Wizard of Oz, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is kind of our Mad Max, Hurt Locker, post-apocalyptic war story version of the war-torn land of Oz. And I'm so thrilled to be returning with artist Ruben Rojas, colorist Whitney Kogar, and letterer DC Hopkins, as well as a murderer's row of cover talent. And I'm thrilled to be returning to Kickstarter with it.
That's really good because, like I say, it has been a while. I've kept sort of thinking, when are we going to get issue 2? Because I remember when we talked last time, we briefly touched on it. But yeah,
the reason why the timing was as such for the OZ, there was a few reasons behind it. Part of it was Scout's Honor, my previous book at Aftershock Comics. Every book that comes out, I'm always wondering, is this going to stick the landing? Are people going to like it? And nobody was more surprised than me to see the kind of really passionate reaction that we got to Scout's Honor. And so part of me felt like, why have 2 of my books essentially compete for attention when we could just kind of roll one out and then roll the other one? And between that and and COVID-related delays, Ruben is based in Spain. They've been hit very hard over there.
Oh yeah.
And so, giving him some time to sort of, find his footing again and sort of get back to the table. So between those two things, I said, it feels a little bit like poetry to kind of really just launch at the same window that we did last time. It worked really well for us then. Granted, we might not be launching at the same time as somebody like Scott Snyder, but I still feel, our Yellow Brick Road Warriors have never let us down. And so I'm very excited to show them what we've been working on, but also to maybe introduce new readers, especially those who enjoyed Scout's Honor, to have them catch up with I think one of the best books that I've ever been involved in.
Yeah, so for those new readers, obviously I'm familiar with it, and I do think that everyone should, back the Kickstarter. We'll get that out. But for people who are unaware of it, how would you describe the OZ?
Sure. So the OZ, the best way I can describe it is, it's what if the Hurt Locker took place in The Wizard of Oz. It's about Dorothy Gale's granddaughter, who's a disillusioned Iraq War veteran, who's come back home really grappling with trauma and depression and trying to find purpose in her life. But when a tornado strikes her small Kansas town, this soldier finds herself stranded in the war-torn land of Oz, where she discovers her grandmother killing the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wicked Witch of the East, and convincing the Wizard of Oz to leave, and then bailing herself, caused a sort of Baghdad-esque power vacuum that has resulted in decades of brutal civil war. And so this new Dorothy is going to have to navigate her grandmother's former friends, our takes on the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Cowardly Lion, if she hopes to bring peace to the occupied zone, or as the locals call it, the OZ. I just, if you like my book, Spencer and Locke, you will love the OZ. If you like Scout's Honor, you're going to love the OZ. It sort of pivots a little from sort of the hard sci-fi of Scout's Honor and goes into a more sort of fantasy vein. But just this is me purely unfiltered. This is sort of me working with just some dynamite collaborators and just watching them cut loose. And it's just been so empowering to watch and so heartening to see. We had, at the end total, we had more than 1,300 people back our last campaign. And I'm excited to see how many of them come back. I think if anyone's read any of my works before, the first issues are always the quiet issue. So now that we've introduced Dorothy and we've established what happened to Oz, now we really get to put pedal to the metal and really get to crank things up to 11 as far as the action is concerned.
Yeah, because I was going to say that there are definite similarities, being familiar with Spencer and Locke and Scout's Honor. I can see there are similarities between them, particularly in sort of Dorothy's mental state, I would probably say. Yes,
Dorothy, I mean, she's been through some stuff, and we will dig into that further and further as the series progresses. But yeah, she and Locke, they're very much spiritual cousins in a way. And I think each of them would probably look at each other with some side eye and be like, "Oh, you're just a tourist," when it comes to trauma. But Dorothy, she's a soldier, and she's seen some things overseas that have really kind of made her question what she was doing over there, and kind of made her question, was there any upside here? Was it worth it at all? Because at the end of the day, all she wants to do is serve. All she wants to do is stand up for the little guy. And it's not always that black and white when you're actually on the battlefield. I think the difference between what Dorothy saw in Iraq and Afghanistan and what she's seeing in the OZ is that when she was overseas, she was sort of one part of a unit. There was a degree of anonymity there, but I think that was also meant a degree of powerlessness. She's not calling the shots. She's just kind of rolling with the punches as they come. Whereas in Oz, because by virtue of her grandmother was considered a war hero. And so there's a lot of pressure on her. There's a difference between being sort of a soldier on the ground and having to lead. And she's realizing that it's a very different battlefield, but it's one that might provide her some level of redemption. Sort of a chance to right the things that went wrong in another war. Maybe this is her second chance to get things right. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of doubt, a lot of inner demons that she's going to have to confront, and really taking a hard, long look at her grandmother's legacy, and seeing kind of what happened to her friends that she left along the way. And so I'm very excited. Our second issue, we get to introduce new members of our cast, which is great. Our first issue really focused heavily on the dynamic between the Dorothy and the Tin Soldier, who are sort of, there are echoes of Spencer and Locke in that kind of dynamic. But now we get to see our twists on, say, the Cowardly Lion, or Jack Pumpkinhead. They are both going to play some pretty big roles in this second issue, and seeing more of the Wizard of Oz himself. We've got some very fun stuff planned for him as well. It's just, we get to really pull back the curtain and we get to explore a lot of different corners of this new world. I said this a lot in our last Kickstarter. I looked at Star Wars as a big inspiration for the scale of this world. Star Wars has all these different worlds with all these different tones and flavors, and you can tell almost by looking at them, the difference between Hoth and Tatooine and Endor and Coruscant, for example. And that was something we really tried to approach with the OZ, and I think so far so good. Just finding just a different vibe for every single place, and that has its own unique flavors and its own unique dangers. And that has been a really fun way to put Dorothy and company through their paces.
Yeah. It's interesting you sort of mentioned Star Wars, because it does feel a bit like we've blown up the Death Star. The original Dorothy solved all the problems. The witches was gone. It was all going so well. But then it's like, what happens after?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels a bit like that. Like that big moment there, it wasn't the end of that world. Continues on,
Well,
and it's interesting to see how it goes.
I promise you, this trilogy is all written by the same guy. I promise there's a plan. Yeah, I liken it to having my cake and eating it too, because we're able to address some real world concerns about what happens to soldiers when they come home, and PTSD, and sort of what are the ethics of war.
Yeah.
But also we're able to embrace this sort of larger than life fantasy action adventure. And so, for me, the guiding principle that I've always tried to put in all of my work, especially when I'm dealing with trauma, is how do I approach my characters with as much empathy and compassion as possible? Like not treating what's happened to them as a punchline, but instead as sort of an emotional beat, and really just taking it at face value. And I think that has sort of helped me kind of navigate that high wire act a little bit, because look, I'm never going to be Greg Rucka, where Greg, he's got, 20 years of writing on me.
Yeah.
And he knows those details backwards and forwards. And so you can feel the granularity, the texture in every story. I'm not going to get that deep in the weeds. And that's in part just because I'm not Greg Rucka. I'm not that talented. But, in a former life, I was a newspaper reporter. I interviewed a lot of returning veterans and asked them sort of what was it like trying to reintegrate back into society. And there was, a couple of themes that kept popping out in all of these interviews, sort of this sense of alienation and isolation, of not being able to really articulate exactly how it felt over there. But also sort of what does it feel like to kind of come down from the hypervigilance of being overseas in a war zone. And also, it's very highly structured and regimented over there. And how do you then kind of come back into, especially American society, where it's kind of the Wild West? There's very little structure. It's just throw you in the deep end of the pool and hope you can swim. And so trying to take those moments and kind of put them into one character. So far I've been really thrilled by seeing we've had veterans say, this book really resonated with me. And I think that's kind of the highest praise that I could ever ask for, especially because I know I haven't served. But trying to be as compassionate as I can with people's real world trauma and real world stories. That's been kind of the guiding principle I've had through the whole series. If people, I think if people see that, then they're much more willing to accept than being able to say, oh, well, let's do a cool action sequence on top of all that.
Yeah. Because Dorothy does feel really informed by real world experiences and real world problems. And I think that's what makes her such an interesting protagonist, is that here is someone who can cope. Ironically, she's fine in war, but when it's not a war, she doesn't know how to cope. And she's reluctant to get back into that war situation initially. Yeah. Before she finds that gives her some sort of purpose that she's been missing. That's really interesting.
I think you hit it on the head, and we'll be seeing that a bit in the second issue as well. Dorothy, she does struggle with doubt in sort of the line of fire, but like when push comes to shove, she can handle herself. But yeah, it's those quiet moments. That's when things start to really get to her. And that's something I really like about her arc as a character, is seeing sort of her being this very reluctant hero and this very reluctant leader, and then watching her sort of in spite of herself really kind of come into her own in all this. And I think that's her way of sort of settling these past traumas a bit. It's a little exposure therapy in a way.
I was going to say, yeah.
Like I was saying, it's this way of making right what once went wrong.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's been a really, I think, special process to be a part of. And it's one of the reasons why, I love all of my characters, especially my murderous gingers and my husband. But, Dorothy, she holds a really special place for me. She's one of my favorite characters I've ever written. And seeing her journey and knowing how her journey goes it's very exciting, and I can't wait for people to really get to know her even better in this next Kickstarter.
That's really good, because there's certainly, it does feel like we've sort of scratched the surface and sort of revealed some really interesting stuff. Just seeing her little arc in that first issue of seeing her come to terms with it all, like she can't change what happened then, but this is her chance to change the present.
Yes,
it's really great. I really enjoyed that bit of her character, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
Yeah. And you know, we've got some other fun characters in store as well. I mean, you know, there's our take on the Cowardly Lion, and I'll say he's Ruben's favorite character to draw in the whole series. So you know, so there's already been some cool stuff, and Ruben is still working on pages on the back half of the second issue, and just seeing what he's done already, I'm just like, oh, this looks so good. You know, the lion reminds me a lot. I keep in mind, I wrote this book. Most of it was done pre-pandemic, and so I channeled a lot of Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther into that role. Sort of this idea of, you know, he's a king, and so making sure we know this is a regal figure, but also recognizing there are certain similarities, parallels that he has with Dorothy, and in particular, it's heavy the head that rests the crown, and knowing that, like, it's one thing to be brave when you're just fighting for yourself, but how does that calculus of courage change when you're the king of the animal kingdom and you suddenly have millions of subjects that you have to fight for? And there's a degree of pressure to that, and a degree of doubt. And suddenly that idea of fear takes a very different shade. And I think that's something that he and Dorothy will really find a lot of common ground on. And then meanwhile, there's Jack Pumpkinhead, who I've said, I mean, Toto is my favorite just character in the book for a variety of reasons. But Jack might have been my favorite to write. He's got, I drew a lot of influence from the comics version of Taskmaster. And just the idea of this, like, very blue collar mercenary who's, you know, he's good at what he does, but he has kind of a sense of humor about it. His voice pops. It just popped on every single page, even before art came in. I was like, oh, that, like, you could see it in the script, like, that's a Jack line. And you got just a tiny little bit of it in his one line in the first issue. But now Jack is really going to be on the front lines of this second issue, and just a really fun character to keep throwing into the mix, because, you know, he's not only a threat, but he's like a total d-hole, you know, like just a total jerk. And seeing kind of how his arc will progress in issues 2 and 3, it's something that's really special. And yeah, just I consider him kind of the wild card in the mix.
Yeah.
And we've got some really fun plans in store for him. But yeah, I can safely say issue 2, it's going to be Jack and Dorothy going head to head for a significant portion of everything. And yeah, you know, who knows how the chips are going to fall with him, but very, very fun character to write for sure.
That's interesting, because we've not seen much of him so far. So it is going to be interesting to dig a little bit deeper with him. That's good to know.
And we'll see a little more of the Scarecrow as well. You know, he's still kind of, you know, he's almost like a shark, kind of, you know, he pops up every so often. You'll see him, and you'll see him in our preview, and some of the plans that he has in store. But issue 3 is where we really will see. We will really get inside the Scarecrow's head, and it's not a nice place, you know, and sort of seeing kind of how the war has affected him. That's, I think, some of the, you know, Dorothy and the Scarecrow are sort of the emotional highlights of issue 3, and some stuff with the Tin Man. But yeah, issue 2, it's really, you know, if you like Toto, if you like Jack, if you like the Lion, you're gonna really enjoy issue 2.
I think everyone must like Toto, because that reveal was really great. Ignore the terrier behind the curtain. I mean, that was That was a really good reveal, particularly because earlier you had Dorothy, the original Dorothy, the grandmother, talking about Toto.
Yeah.
And then Dorothy gets to say when Toto asks, does she still think about me? And she's like, every day. It was great, that moment.
It's they say write what you know, and I've been very fortunate. I grew up with little Cairn Terriers my whole life, and that's the same breed as Toto from the Judy Garland film. And when I started writing the OZ, we had just taken in my parents' terrier Holly. She was I think 11, and so she was such a sweetheart that of course like writing about this heroic terrier was so wonderful. And I will say it's not really a spoiler, but I started writing the OZ when we took Holly in, and I started getting those pages of Toto shortly after Holly passed. We cared for her for her last year. She had a melanoma, and it was funny when we got the diagnosis. We bought about a year of extra time with her, and mercifully she was not in any pain. But I said to myself, Toto was supposed to have a very short role, and I said no. I distinctly remember I got the diagnosis, and beyond sort of scheduling appointments, the very first thing I did was rewrite Toto's arc to give him a significant role in the story. And suffice to say, he's got a big damn hero moment in this next issue that I think is probably thus far my favorite part of the issue. And so, yeah, he's if you're a fan of him, you will definitely not want to miss out on this Kickstarter.
Excellent. There's another reason. There are many reasons, but that's certainly up there, I would say. I'd like to go back as well to the Tin Man.
Yeah.
The Tin Soldier, because he was always my favorite character in the films. Never figured out why. Just one of those things. Yeah. And then I think one of the most emotional moments for me was sort of he became the Tin Soldier and all it cost was his heart. Yeah. And that was really, that was very, and that seemed as well to reflect soldiers in general, like how much they have to sacrifice.
Yeah, no, the Tin Soldier, I mean, I consider him the heart of the book, and no pun intended, but he steals every scene that he's in, and I love having him as sort of that foil to Dorothy. I was just watching Ted Lasso. I was just watching the new episodes, and I realized like he's the Coach Beard to Dorothy's Ted Lasso, or I guess her Led Tasso, since she's very much the opposite of Ted. And he's got some really cool beats in this second issue. We get to really kind of dig into him as a character a little bit more. And he's Dorothy's ride or die. And he's the first one to have found her in the occupied zone, and sort of their dynamic is kind of the spine of the book in a big way. And so he's a really fun character to write, and we'll get to see a little bit more of him. It's not to say he is present in just about every scene of the book, but he does sort of he is going to give a little bit of spotlight to some of these new characters as well. He's got some really cool moments in issue 3 that, like, obviously we haven't even started drawing it yet, but like I wrote it a year and a half ago, and I'm just like, I can't wait to see Ruben draw them, because I mean, that was sort of the goal for all of these characters. But I think the Tin Man and Toto are the ones I did it the best with. Is I want you to fall in love with them, and I want you to feel like stakes, that when they're in danger, you're like, I don't want something to happen to them. And the Tin Man is keep an eye on him, because he's Ruben just did such an amazing job with him as a character. The design, it's funny, Ruben, when I first talked with him, he just kind of did a guy in armor, like a suit of armor, and I said, actually, I kind of want him to be the armor, like he's sort of almost kind of like a battle mech. And once I described that, like, Ruben loves post-apocalyptic stuff in addition to fantasy, so this is the perfect book for him. And that tin soldier design, the first issue cover is the first time that design came together. That was the very first time that I saw it, and I was just like, "You're hired. You're hired. That's it. It's a done deal." So yeah, expect some more cool stuff coming from him very soon.
Excellent, because the character designs are really, really good. Everything from the flying monkeys to the Tin Man to, even the way Toto looks. Yeah. So obviously you said to him, you're hired. How did you come about collaborating with the creative team on this in the first place?
So Ruben and I, we've been in contact for a long time. I saw Ruben post his portfolio years ago on somebody was looking for a comic artist. And I always tend to troll those threads just to be like, good, and I saw Ruben's portfolio and I immediately reached out to him. And I had reached out I said, I have 3 projects and I want to know if you're interested in any of them. And he immediately gravitated towards the OZ. And I think because I didn't know it at the time, but he's like, oh, fantasy and kind of like a post-apocalyptic bent, like that sounds exactly up my alley. And so, it took some time, and thankfully I had time, like I was working on other projects. I had Spencer and Locke 2 and Going to the Chapel that I was working on as we were slowly putting pages together. And Ruben, he's a terrific collaborator. I can't say enough good things about him. He really knows like his best angles, and that's something that for a creator with not a huge body of work, that's often kind of rare. I often as sort of an editor in the thumbnail stage, I'm like, well, what if we kind of did this to sort of, showcase the character a little bit more or to make it a little more dynamic. Ruben, I very rarely have to say anything. He just really kind of gets it. And the few times that I'm like, oh, what if we did this to punch it up? He immediately knows exactly what I'm talking about. He sees my crappy little stick figures and is like, oh, like I get it. I know what you're talking about. Let me do a much better version of this. And he's so gracious. That's like the best part. Like I'm telling you, a guy that talented does not need to be that humble. And yet at the same time, he is just really just a joy to work with. I can't say enough good things about Ruben. And then same thing with Dave Hopkins, our letterer. I met Dave at Denver Comic-Con a few years ago. And we shared a mutual friend, Michael Mocchio, who used to be an editor at Boom Studios, and now he's over at Universal. And he was saying, oh, I heard about Spencer and Locke, and it looks so interesting. And he seemed like just a genuinely sweet guy. And so I was like, oh, dude, like here, take the book and like let's work on something together. And boy, if Dave Hopkins is not my favorite letterer in the business, I really don't know who is. Just a really sweet man. And one who is so patient with me, because if I have any kryptonite as a writer, it's that sometimes my dialogue is a little wordy. And if you think it's wordy on the printed page, imagine what it was before I cut one. I want to make sure the book feels dense so it's not like too quick to read. But, and Dave is just very patient when I'm like, oh, this balloon is way too huge. Let me cut a bunch of words out of it to make it not so oppressive. And then Whitney Kogar, she was the final member of the team. I find that letterers are usually the last person to join, historically for me, for my books. And that's because there's a lot of pressure to get the right colorist. It's finding somebody who can complement the art style, but also elevate it, and kind of like Ruben knows his best angles, Whitney knows Ruben's best shades and best palettes. And so, when I was an intern at DC Comics back in the day, I worked on Batman R.I.P. and Final Crisis and Green Lantern Secret Origins, and then kind of whatever else was going on at the moment. And they really drilled into me how important color is. They said, art makes or breaks your book, but colors make or break your art. And so I very rarely, there's always like a lot of tryouts in terms of who's going to color my books. It's very rarely the first person I approach. And Michael Mocchio, he recommended Whitney, having worked with her at Boom. And what a joy to work with. I tell Whitney every chance I get, I want this to be the first of many books. She is just so terrific to work with, and she takes notes, what few I have to give, extremely well. yeah, she gives a sense of weight and energy to all of Ruben's inks, and yeah, it's just you sort of see. Usually for me, the book doesn't click until the lettering comes. I'm sort of like, these pages look good, but is it gonna look good when there's lettering on it? That's not the case for the OZ. The OZ, I know the moment the colors come in, oh, that page worked. And so like that's part of the reason why for our Kickstarter, I wanted to make sure it was a value add for everybody. And so not only, if you throw down money for issue 2 or anything higher than issue 2, you will also get scripts for the first for the second issue, as well as the raw inks and Whitney's untouched colors. Because then you really get to see, if you're interested in the behind the scenes material, you're able to really get to see, oh, like this is what it looks like. And it really just shows how much Whitney's style elevates the already incredible work that Ruben's doing.
Yeah, it does feel like you have the entire creative team really on top of the game with it. Yeah. You can see all that effort on the page, which is not always the case with Kickstarted books. Sometimes you can tell that things have gone wrong, but here it feels very collaborative, like you were all doing your best work all the way through, and you were all aware of each other.
It's been a real feedback loop, particularly between Ruben and Whitney. I think I would see Ruben's pages come in, and as I was writing, I was like, well, I gotta top this now. And then Whitney would see Ruben's pages come in and just be like, oh, this is amazing. I'm gonna put it like my absolute A game on this. And then Ruben would see those pages come in and he'd be like, oh, well, I gotta clearly like step it up. And so seeing all that together is like been very helpful. And I think it's kept us enthusiastic about a project that's had, I'll admit, a longer than usual runway. We're not racing to turn out an issue every 7 weeks, every 6 or 7 weeks, like we did for Scout's Honor. That book was the fastest I've ever put out a book. But I think, Ruben and I are in agreement that, like, at the end of the day, the length between Kickstarters, nobody's going to bat an eye as long as the book is good. At the end of the day, when they're holding all 3 issues of the OZ in their hands, they're not going to know it was 2 years in between them. They're just going to know, oh, this is really good. Or hopefully they'll think it's really good. Yeah, that's sort of the thing that sort of made me feel a little bit better, knowing like Ruben needs to take the time. He needs to take the time to make it right. And I would hate to watch him try to rush it. I would hate to watch him, cut corners. And so I just said, all right, we won't make you do that. Take the time you need to get it right. And so he's doing really just terrific work. And he's got an amazing career ahead of him. And I hope he'll let me ride his coattails for as long as possible.
Fingers crossed. Because I think that's the thing with Kickstarters. I don't mind waiting if I know that the quality is there, and I know that the people who are making it are able to take the time without the pressure of deadlines to put it together and make it the best that they want it to be. Yeah. Sometimes it has felt with some Kickstarters like you're rushing, just take your time, just slow down. The audience will still be there in a few months.
Yeah, and that's a benefit I have as a writer, is that I'm able to sort of juggle a few more projects at once, and knowing that like there's some creators out there who like it almost feels like they have to have something out every single month, and I'm not there yet. Like I for me, I'm kind of fine sort of having rest periods, because for me, the job is not over until the trade's out.
Yeah.
And so it's an exhausting marathon. And so having like a couple months to just sort of say I'm not doing a publicity tour, I'm just working on the thing that I need to be making. That's helpful for me. But yeah, it's just we've had people asking, where's the OZ? Where's the OZ? And I'm like, I promise. We wanted to get a good critical mass of pages together. We have that now. And yeah, I was just like, it's poetry. A year later, I'd like to see how our readership has grown. Hopefully, they'd like to see how we've grown as creators. And we also, we've taken some time. The big learning curve I had last time was the sense of scale of it all. I don't think I was really prepared for success in that Kickstarter. It was sort of, I said, how do I make $6,000 in 30 days? It was a question of, what do you do after you make it in 2 hours? And so now I've learned from that. And so if you liked any of our stretch goals from the last time, you should really encourage your friends to back the Kickstarter, share it on any platform you want so more people can see it without spoiling too much. If you liked our enamel pins, our flying monkey pins last time, you might want to tell your friends to back and share. If you liked our print from Kira Okamoto, who's recently done covers for Radiant Black and Firepower, you might want to tell your friends to back and share. If you liked our theme song that the band Bed Death put together for the last Kickstarter, you might want to tell your friends to back and share. This time I've had a year to prepare and be like, okay, how far can we take this? But that said, I know that can sound really intimidating for people who weren't there for the last campaign. And so I want to make sure if you missed the last campaign, there is a place for you here with the OZ. We have catch-up tiers, both print and digital. So if you missed the first issue, we can get you up to speed. And I will say for our first 48 hours, we are actually doing early bird specials. So if you want to catch up, you can do it for the first 48 hours actually at a discount price. But if you're a collector, if you missed our last Kickstarter, we had 5 covers last Kickstarter. We're going to do 4 this go around, at least for now. Again, if you like and share. If you're a collector and you missed all that, we do have bundles for 9 covers. So you can get everything. Or if you've never read my work, we'll have bundles with my trades. Spencer and Locke 2, Go Into the Chapel, and Scout's Honor, which will be hitting comic shops everywhere September 8th. We're something for everybody here. Even the diehard collectors, we can get you drawn into the book. We have original commissions from Ruben. Any character you want, he'll do a head sketch. They're beautiful. He takes way too much detail on those headshots. We have a couple of handcrafted Spencer and Locke plushies, as well as so many people ask me about this, and we have a small handful, a complete set of 14 Scouts Honor Ranger Scout merit badges. You cannot get those. I will go so far as to say Kickstarter will probably be the only place you can get a complete set. They are scattered and hard to find, but I'm willing to give up 3 of my 10 sets for the OZ. Like I said, there's something for everyone and every level of budget. And so long as the Kickstarter does even modestly well, we'll probably do another backer kit store on the back end of the series as well. So if you decide you just want to pick up one of my books a la carte, there will be options for you to do that as well. It's I'm trying to meet people where they're at, even down to our lowest tier. We have a $5 thank you tier. While it doesn't include the OZ specifically, you'll still get thanked in the OZ, but you'll also get a PDF of the first issue of Spencer and Locke and Go Into the Chapel, just to say thank you, that you're getting something out of all of this. And you'll be getting those PDFs in every single tier of the campaign. So really, you're getting, I think for $10, you're getting at least 88 pages of story. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw like another, digital comics extravaganza from some friends and family, if the Kickstarter does well. So it's a lot of bang for your buck, no matter how much you want to put in.
See, that sounds like you've spent a lot of time planning this Kickstarter and getting to know and being aware of what your audience and what your backers will go for, because all of that sounds really good. It's been really fun, and doing it in a way that I'm not, having a year to prepare. It's like, so it's almost decadent, just having that time, because
that was the biggest stressor of my last campaign, to be quite honest. Beyond sort of the fulfillment, of packing over 1,000 books in my 2-bedroom apartment, it was, we kind of blew through these goals, and I still want to keep people interested for 30 days. How do we keep adding more content? How do we do this in an accelerated time frame in a way that we're not compromising on quality and we're not blowing up our shipping budget? And that really, thankfully, I'm really fortunate that I'm friendly with people like Charlie Stickney, the creator of White Ash, a super generous friend. Ryland Grant, the creator of The Peacekeepers and The Jump. Russell Nahelty and Pat Shand, who each have a laundry list of Kickstarter projects. And being able to kind of pick their brains a little bit and just being like, okay, like, what did you do? And is there a way to do this in like a week? Now we don't have to do that. Now it's sort of, we can take a few weeks, or we've taken a few months in some cases, to be like, all right, this is a cool thing. Like, how do I, how can we mass produce this? How can we get this ready? If we build it, will the backers come? And I can't help but feel some degree of confidence that they will. I'm trying not to put expectations on this Kickstarter because, the world is both very similar to how it was a year ago, but also very different. Yeah. And, I know budgets are tight. The pandemic is kind of coming back with a horrible vengeance. And that's why I'm working really hard. I want to meet people where they're at. And I want to sort of make this project, I want to give them as many bells and whistles as possible, in addition to what I think is a very strong core story, to make sure that they feel like it is sort of a higher price point than buying something in the direct market. And so I want people to know that, like, we appreciate that, and that we want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth.
That's really good and really thoughtful, because Kickstarter is a very different kind of a delivery mechanism for creative work, if that's the right sort of term to use, than the direct market. So well, and especially now, seeing how international shipping has gone, I do apologize to our international backers in advance. Hello, yes.
I apologize. I know that it's the shipping costs are a pain, especially for the UK. Those shipping costs are a little pricey, and I apologize for that. We did all the research we could to see if there's any way to sort of shrink that down, and thus far we have not been able to find them. But even so, we're trying to make sure that, like, everybody's stuff is shipped safely and everything can make it through customs. And boy, it's just it's a whole lot of stuff that a year ago I had no idea what I was doing. And now I feel like, okay, we're able to do this in a way that feels financially responsible, and is sort of keeping up to, ever-changing rules and laws for international shipping. But yeah, we will do worldwide shipping. If someone's willing to buy it, we're willing to ship it. And if you don't want to pay shipping, we do have digital options that will also keep you up to speed.
Yeah. Speaking as someone who has been bitten by the shipping before now, living in the UK is not great. But I do know for certain books, I do find the shipping worth it. So there you go. And certainly I think the OZ will be one of those.
Thank you.
Here's a question. So obviously we're familiar with the OZ, but how would you sell it, if you will, to someone who had never heard of the Wizard of Oz?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I'm almost like a little stumped just thinking about it. No, if somebody had never heard of the Wizard of Oz, I would say think Mad Max meets Star Wars, but with a fantasy bent, or Mad Max meets Game of Thrones. I think it's tough because, of course, part of the reason I picked the Wizard of Oz as a riff is, it's like cultural osmosis. It's, even if you've never seen the movie, you kind of, ruby slippers. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. And while we can't use ruby slippers, legally speaking, because that was an invention of Warner Brothers and not L. Frank Baum, the the archetypes are certainly based off that. But at the same time, I always talk about my influences that I think are help sell the book as well. Particularly, I mean, I don't usually get a lot of gaming influences in my work, but I do really strongly in the OZ. If you like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VII, you will really like it. I was playing a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake while I was doing like the back half of this book. So you'll see, you'll kind of be like, oh yeah, I recognize these kind of archetypes and the way that the team kind of fits together. But yeah, it's I think if you like Mad Max, if you like things like Jarhead or American Sniper or The Hurt Locker, with sort of that high flying, larger than life action of a Star Wars, or even a little bit of like a Mission Impossible, in terms of sort of the military bent to some of this stuff. Then you'll probably find a lot to like. Or if I want to cheat, I'll just be like, oh, if you like Spencer and Locke, then check out the OZ, because they really are. I consider those books spiritual cousins to one another. I came up with the OZ right on the heels of Spencer and Locke, saying, what's a fantasy version of this crime story. And so yeah, I think that's part of the reason why it means so much to me, and why I wound up rolling the dice on Kickstarter. Was I already got tired of waiting for publishers to give me permission to tell my stories, but that was the one that I was like, I refuse to not let this story be a thing. Ruben had already drawn 2 issues, and they were so beautiful that I was like, I told him when he finished the first 6 pages in the cover, I said, come hell or high water, this book will exist. And I don't care if I have to pay every last page of it. It will happen, and people will love it. And Ruben proved me right.
Yep, it's true. So when is the Kickstarter launching?
Yes,
would be the question.
It's launching officially Monday, August 16th. So 1 week from today, when we're talking. And it'll be going on for 30 days. So I believe that ends in the morning on September 15th. And so the first 48 hours are really the most crucial. A lot of people don't know this, but Kickstarter places you in their algorithm based on how many people back your campaign in the first 48 hours. So any amount is super helpful. And the other thing that I learned this last time, and I didn't realize that this would be the case, but now I warn everybody. Not warn, but I clarify. You don't get charged until the Kickstarter ends. Yeah. So if you're saying like, oh, I don't want to back until the end of the Kickstarter because of payday, don't worry about it. You will not be charged until the 15th of September. So if you see something that's catching your eye, back it early. Especially some of our premier tiers, they are going to go by fast. I can tell you that getting drawn into the book, for example, I think we have 5 slots available for that. We went through all of them, I want to say, in the first 48 hours last time, or maybe the first 72 at best. Same thing for the commissions. Those commissions fly. And so, definitely if you see something, jump on it, because the limited edition stuff does go by pretty quickly. But that's why just any amount matters. And telling your friends and family, sharing it on social media, all these things are huge helps for us. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, and this is probably a terrible thing for like a commercial storyteller to say, but I don't care about the money. I really don't care about the money, because the dirty secret is any amount of money I make on the OZ is just going to go towards me funding another project. It's just going to go back into the work. For me, what I care about, and the whole reason I did this Kickstarter in the first place, is it's reaching out to a different readership than the diehard Wednesday Warriors. And it's not to say there isn't some small degree of overlap, but I find that they are still fairly distinct groups. And I want to sort of reunite that readership diaspora. I want to bring them, invite them to the same table. And so for me, the only number that matters is how many readers we have. And so that's why we were so fortunate. We had over 1,300 people join us last time, between the initial campaign and people who have joined us on BackerKit since then. And I don't know. I'm curious how many will come back. I hope we'll see a lot of them come back. I hope we'll get new readers. I hope people who read Scout's Honor and weren't aware of my other work join us this time, because I think you'll really love the book. I'm trying not to put a lot of expectations on myself. Like I said, it's very different a different time than it was a year ago. And I don't anticipate launching alongside somebody like Scott Snyder this time, who in the direct market, that would have killed me. But on Kickstarter, it was like having an amazing headwind at my back. But I'm just excited to be back. And I think, anything beyond getting funded is a victory for us. And I want to share this book with as many people as possible, because honestly, I think it's some of the best work I've ever done. And I really think that this creative team, pound for pound, are one of they are equal to anything in the direct market. And I think if you haven't seen Ruben Rojas and Whitney Kogar and DC Hopkins tag team it, you really owe it to yourself to see some damn good comics.
I would heartily agree with that. I think it's just so good, and the creative team so on form. And I would also echo, if you did like Scout's Honor, there seem to be definite parallels between the two. I would say more parallels between this and Spencer and Locke, but I would hope that some of those people who enjoyed Scout's Honor would come to the OZ, because
very much
yeah.
And I wrote them kind of back to back. And so, that voice that you got in Scout's Honor very much came from that voice that I was using in the OZ. And so, but we get some nice, first person narration going on through the whole thing. So you really get into Dorothy's head in a big way. And, I think if you like Scout's Honor, I really think you're going to find a lot to enjoy, about the OZ.
Definitely. So what is the plan ultimately then for the OZ? So you're kickstarting the second issue. I'm assuming you will eventually, hopefully, be doing the third.
Yes. So a lot of people have asked me sort of what are the end plans for the OZ, and usually it's somebody asking, are you planning on working with a publisher with it? And my answer has been the same since the beginning. We have no plans to work with a publisher at this time. If that changes, that's cherry on top. But my thing is, we shopped this book around, and we had a lot of places express interest, but the way that it tends to work in the direct market, it's a little ADD, it's sort of a fire breaks out and you got to go run and catch it. And so much of a pitch getting accepted is just as much about the timing of it all as it is the quality. And, when Diamond had its shutdown last year, a lot of publishers, their acquisitions pipelines immediately shrank. And I said, well, I should kind of solve one problem with another. I've been meaning to do a Kickstarter, and why not give the OZ a welcoming home and introduce ourselves with our A game? Our Kickstarter backers believed in us. They're the ones that put their money where their mouths were. They're the reason the OZ exists. And they're the reason why we've been sort of so hard at work over the last year. And so my absolute overarching directive is to make sure our Kickstarter backers are taken care of first. And so, we will finish the series on Kickstarter. I don't care if I get hit by a bus, the scripts are already written. So, I'll have my successors, handle editorial. This will get done. I should say, as long as Ruben doesn't get hit by a bus, we will see this book through, on Kickstarter. And then, as far as, we there's a certain calculus that goes into collected editions and things like that. Do you want to do a soft cover? Do you want to do a hardcover? There are certain avenues that can be taken, in sort of a larger field with that. So we haven't really got to that point yet. Somebody asked me this just the other day, and I'm like, our top concern right now is just finishing the singles. And then once that's done, we can take a beat and figure out, okay, is the demand there for a collected edition now that the singles are done? But I think I want to make sure our Kickstarter backers know we will never leave them out in the cold. I plan on using Kickstarter as a platform beyond the OZ. And to be honest, I've sort of been chomping at the bit where there are certain projects that I'm building steam on that I'm kind of like, well, I don't want to put that on Kickstarter until the OZ's done. Yeah. And I think that's in part because I don't want to confuse our readers, I don't want them to feel like there's any chance of me kind of picking their pockets of bouncing from series to series. We're going to see this one through. But I consider everything in my career, I want to look at it from a sustainable point of view. And Kickstarter I see as really kind of a wonderful platform for true financial equity, in an industry that's very hard to come by. A lot of books, even at bigger publishers, it's not enough to pay your rent, or it's a loss leader, and you sort of have to kind of scrape to make your money back in the convention scene. Kickstarter, you don't have to do that. And so I value that platform. I value our readers. And so I want to make sure that they feel respected and that they feel like we have their best interests in mind. And so that really came down to everything, all of our reward tiers, down to this, we will not be getting into bed with a publisher without this being done. And not that any publishers, I should say, it makes it sound like we've had publishers down our door. But it's sort of, we wouldn't even be taking those calls until the thing is done. So that's where we stand.
Excellent. Well, I'll be backing it, and I will be encouraging everyone else to back it. Who knows what tiers we'll be going for yet?
Yes.
But if you could sum up the OZ in one sentence, what would it be?
Dorothy Gale's Iraq War veteran granddaughter finds herself stranded in the war-torn land of Oz.
Excellent strapline. So yeah, thank you very much. That was very interesting. I do enjoy this book, and it was great to speak to you about it.
Thank you.
And I really hope the Kickstarter does go well. I'm hoping you will get more than 1,300 backers. We will see.
That's the dream.
Fingers crossed.
Well, if anybody, if anybody wants to follow the OZ, you can sign up for our pre-launch page, or depending when this goes live, the Kickstarter may already be up. But you can visit bit.ly/theozcomic or the OZ Comic 2. Both links will take you to the same page. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Pepose D. It's just my last name and first initial. David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can sign up for my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews. I send it out every 3 weeks. It's to let my family know I'm still alive. Or you can visit my website, davidpepose.com, where I'll be selling copies of all of my books. But seriously, at this point, you should wait and just back the Kickstarter because, like I said, we'll be offering everything a la carte on BackerKit if you don't want to get the full package of everything. And so you'll be able to get any books you want with my name on it once that Kickstarter is over.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.